Ladies, gentlemen, am I often forgotten, but certainly not by me, Onyx but Criminal Bolt. Welcome to the channel and welcome to another video. This video is going to be an update to my ED1 range guide. Ever since I made that guide, I've been doing the dungeon a bit more just for the GP that it offers, being that at time of recording, the scales are around 1.25 mil, and I've changed quite a few things about how I do the dungeon and run through it, most notably to make one cycle a lot more reliable, and also a way to fit the Luck of the Dwarves relic into my relics while still maintaining good damage and being able to get out some decent rotations. However, I did not change enough things about how I do the dungeon to warrant like just scrapping the whole guide and making a new one. So today I'll just be highlighting the differences between like my old and new preset, how I do the one cycle rotation, and any other bits of the dungeon that get changed around a little bit. I'll make sure to note those as well. But without further ado, let's go ahead and get into this guide. Alrighty, here is the new preset. So compared to the old one, I just have the old one pulled up on my side monitor. I've done away with the spirituals because I'm not running Ripper Demon, and I even dropped the food down quite a bit. I switched over from Super Brews to Super Guthix Rest. Now when I made this old guide, the update for Super Guthix Rest was not in game yet, but they are now updated to not use your Adrenaline Potion cooldown or share cooldown with the Adren Potion. So now we basically just have better Guthix Rests available, which are nice because while they don't heal as much, they don't drain your stats at all, which is very nice for some bosses and just kind of most bosses in general. You know, if you can get away with using Guthix Rest or Super Guthix Rest, go ahead and use them because your damage overall during the fight will be higher. Now also this preset was also made before the dive update with the puzzle box, so that gave me 2 free inventory spaces to play with as well. But as you can see, I took Luck of the Dwarves out of the preset and I just put it in as a relic, and then I went ahead and dropped Conservation of Energy as a relic. And I went ahead and did that because I wasn't having too many issues as far as adrenaline is concerned, being that I'm not really using Deadshot too much other than the beginning of the dungeon and maybe in a couple other random places, mostly in the room of melee trash mobs just before Masuta and the giant wave of meleeers just before the first door in the first room. Those are the only really places I use Deadshot, and as far as Death Swift is concerned, I haven't noticed really too many issues dropping COE because I'm not having to get a tsunami off during that ultimate, you know, a couple abilities in, because I am now using Deathspore arrows in place of hydrix and doing those old rotations, and so I get a free incendiary shot after my Death Swift is started, and it happens immediately, so it's not too big of a deal. Now, COE is good if you can fit it into your relics. I highly recommend it. However, with Luck of the Dwarves and Fury of the Small, I can't fit in COE, so I went ahead and just went with Zerker's Fury. And Zerker's Fury honestly is really nice for the crystals, and one cycle is kind of the big contention of the dungeon, being that most people aren't really going for Masuta skip to try and save time and get an extra run per hour. One cycle is going to be the big focus, and being that you're not taking damage while doing the crystal portion of the fight, you can easily camp low HP and do a bit more damage, anywhere from 3 to 5% more damage, just from the nature of you being low health and how the relic worked. I was also able to fit in Nightmare Gauntlets because there's a couple places in the dungeon that aren't poisonable, mostly the most notable, the crystals. So I went ahead and brought Nightmares just for the extra little stat boost, and obviously Lucky Charms are there just for the procs that it can give, mostly just the Onyx Dust. And if you want to get elite clues from doing elite dungeons, the Lucky Charms is how you get those, so it's kind of a nice byproduct. You know, you do, you know, say a few hours of elite dungeons, you get a couple of elite clues from your Lucky Charms, and it's just kind of like a nice byproduct. Obviously, it's not like a true farming method for elite clues, you know, cluers have their methods and whatnot, but if you just want like a nice side benefit, like kind of how you get clues from doing thieving, like Priff thieving, while going for 120. It's a nice byproduct that can potentially get you some extra GP, so you might as well bring the charms and do the clues that you get. And other than that, the preset's pretty much the same. I'm running the same armor set cinders, the same EOFs. The full arrows are in the blue Pernix quiver and the Black Pernix Quiver has my Deathspore arrows. So before, I absolutely could not stand how Deathspore arrows worked, being that you had to basically crit farm them to get them reliable, and even sometimes with a full crit setup, they still aren't reliable. However, the ability to just get a free death swiftness is a little bit too hard to pass up, and so I've pretty much swapped over to doing a crit farm setup with full and Deathspore arrows, and triple debos, being able to spam those and getting giant Gricko Adren. It's honestly really nice in the entire duration of your death swiftness, being that you'll use DS and then your second ability will be Incendiary, so you get 30 seconds from when it blows up, so it basically times out well within, you know, the only time you're not going to be getting some type of crit adren buff from Incendiary Shot, I think, is literally the last 2.5 seconds or so of your Death Swift. And I'll be doing a full example of how the one cycle works. That's going to be the example part of this update. So obviously, instead of doing some hydrix build on Sanctum and Masuta, I just go ahead and do Deathspore. Now, what you can try and do is build up Deathspore before you go in, so when you start your Death Swiftness, it's already there. However, I find this pretty unreliable, being that you only have 10 seconds to trigger the Deathspore effect before it goes away. So typically on Sanctum, I'll maybe get a Gricko off on the last minion before I go in, and maybe get 2 or 3 stacks from that, and then just start the boss fight off with a rapid fire and maybe a couple basics to get the remaining stacks I need, and then just do a Death Swiftness rotation from there. Also on Monday, I'm just going to be doing kind of a more in-depth video on my Death Swift rotations with Deathspore and how that works, so keep your eyes out for that one, as I'll be talking in depth of kind of like the general thought processes of what I'm doing during those rotations. As far as Masuta is concerned, I'll usually just do a rapid fire into a Gricko and then another basic to get back to 100%, and usually that will get me all the stacks I need, and then I go ahead and just do a DS Incendiary Shot, and as I do Incendiary Shot, I'll press my Adrenaline Potion and then Limitless Devotion if I need to, if he's already started to spin. Because, you know, Masuta spins, they're always changing. Sometimes they're late, sometimes they're early, sometimes they're in the middle. You never quite know what you're gonna get with Masuta. And then just as the spouts are ending, I will try and build up some Deathspore stacks again for that second DS and just do a kind of standard DS rotation afterwards. However, with Masuta, SGB isn't available, so you get more time to spam more triple debos into his face. But other than that, this is pretty much it. This is the preset you'll see me using on stream to get some extra GP, because the GP per hour here is honestly really good. And I think if you're doing 5 runs an hour and scales are at the price they're currently at, I think it's somewhere north of either 80 or 90 mil an hour, just because when scales are expensive, you're obviously going to get more per hour, and the commons do add up over time. The Sea Singer kits, I believe, are 10 mil. Like, for some reason, they've shot up a lot in price. And honestly, it's a really speedy dungeon to kind of run through. 5 runs an hour is more than doable with any of the combat styles at this point, and range is no exception. In fact, range could probably do 6 an hour if a really competent ranger was doing this. However, I'm pretty relaxed when running through the dungeon, and I only go for 5. But anyways, let's go ahead and get into that example 1 cycle, and I'll walk y'all through the rotations that I use and whatnot and how I do it. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get into that example kill. Alrighty, so I just completed the dungeon up to this point, because this is the part we're going to talk about for how I do 1 cycle, but I just want to showcase here what I do again, because I know these defense pylons can be tricky for some people. So all I do is I surge bladed dive over to here, hold off devotion as long as possible, and then I kill the middle defense pylon. Get a devotion extension, and then kill these 2, and that'll open up this gate over here. And bladed dive over here, and now what I do for the start of the fight is equip my quiver with Deathspore arrows on, make sure my Grim is still on, overloaded and whatnot, and then surge in, and I'll just start with a rapid fire, and then run over to this tile over here. And we already got our Deathspore stacks from that rapid fire, so I'll Death Swift, Incendiary, do an ability, and then just go into kind of some standard rotation stuff where I get off my bow spec. Maybe do something like a snapshot into a rapid. triple Debo off. Move out of the way of that thing. And just kind of move around, getting his HP down. You're at 3 stacks. SGB is also a good idea for the head, because he's large enough. Did forget to Calg spec. But something important to do here is before you go up is to Calg spec again and then start the climb. So that way you have Calg spec for as long as possible up here. What I like to do is use a Vuln Bomb on the crystal, click ECB spec, surge, drop mines, and just start damaging this crystal under ECB. Get off a bow spec. I'll do a couple bleeds here. Maybe a Gricko. Into a snipe. Into a tight bindings and a piercing shot, and we'll just kill off this crystal as quick as we can. Here, I'm going to re-equip my Deathspore and then start a rapid fire. Looking at my stacks here. Gricko should give it did, and then we just do the same thing with Deathspore, Incendiary Shot, use an ability, and I'm going to go ahead and ECB, bleed, bow spec, Gricko, 10Ds into a snapshot. That's the second crystal down. And I'm just going to use a couple bleeds here on this guy. Free up my ECB spec, drop mines, immediately go for a Debo, into a Gricko, into a rapid fire, watching my stacks, and Debo. That should do it, and that did it. As you can tell, I preemptively hit Limitless there in case I need to snapshot, but that's roughly what a 1 cycle looks like at Siru when using Deathspore. So, just as a quick recap, I surge in and just do Rapid Fire Gricko, and then I just do a Death Swift rotation down here. You can ECB, you can kind of play around with whatever rotation works out for you, dependent on the crits you get. SGB works on the head very nicely, as the head is large enough of a hitbox for the SGB to be worthwhile. And I also like to save my A-pot for the second DS up here. So you do a DS down here, and then just before you go up, remember to hit your Calg spec again, so you have Calg spec for all of the first 2 crystals. And for this one, what I do, so I'll explain this part again, what I'll do, because I kind of glossed over it. So as I'm climbing, I will go ahead and press Vulnerability, and then on the crystal, I will right-click, and it'll say Use Vulnerability Bomb on Crystal. And so as soon as you see your character come up to the platform here, you can then just left-click on that option, and you'll automatically target and throw a Vuln Bomb onto the crystal the tick you get up here. Then what I'll do is I will go ahead, and as I hit that left-click, I will then equip my ECB EOF, hit EOF spec, and then surge up to the crystal. Now, obviously, the crystals are here, or aren't here, so I surged further, but you surge right up next to the crystal, and then you can go ahead and then double left-click your mines, and then you're off to the races. Make sure to get, like, a couple bleeds off, the rapid fire, the bow spec, and Gricko double snipe is usually enough to do it. As you saw in the kill, though, I had to do a couple of extra basic abilities just to get the crystal down. But the middle crystal is just getting the Deathspore stacks built up again, and then going for a bow spec under ECB with a 10Ds that gets doubled into a snapshot. Sometimes I use Debo if the HP is a little high, but the HP was low, so I just went for snapshot. And then on the third crystal, you can go ahead and build up your adrenaline again, and you get a couple bleeds going on it. Just remember to re-up your ECB and to drop your mines again and triple Debos. And what I mean by triple Debo is when your bow spec is here, you have it going. You'll see it in number in parentheses. If that number in parentheses is 2, the 2 hits from the Debo spec in your EOF will then get it to 4, thus resetting the cycle and giving you a third Debo hit. So triple Debo under ECB does a lot of damage, and since you're buffed up and whatnot, ready to go, it's gonna absolutely clap the crystal, as you can see. And yeah, I just wanted to make this update for Deathspore because I have been using them a lot recently. I haven't really been using the hydrix builds too much, so coming soon will be a video of just my Death Swift rotations in general, and how I use Deathspore and kind of explaining them in more detail. But I wanted to make this update video for y'all since I have kind of changed how I do 1 cycles here, and I figured it'd be important for y'all to see. Anyways though, thank y'all for watching. Let's go ahead and roll that outro. Ladies, gentlemen, and I did not forget about you Onyx but Criminal Bolts. Thank you very much for watching. Your viewership is greatly appreciated as always. Have a wonderful morning, evening, afternoon, nighttime, whatever it is, wherever you are, and I will see you next time for the next video. Peace!